Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to do a Underdrive water pump pulley and Underdrive alternator pulley. Both I got at zzperformance.com, and the reason I'm putting them on this car isn't so much for power, but just for a little bit of fuel mileage savings. This is my winter beater. I had them on my Monte Carlo before I did a lot of work on it, and they did make a difference. The engine ran a little warmer, so with the way it's set up, hopefully that'll help my fuel mileage a little bit, and especially in the cold. The winter we have right now is really cold, so I'm hoping that'll help. And with the alternator there as well, just hoping to free that up. I've already done the AC delete, which you can kind of see there's no AC compressor down there. So the only reason I'm doing this is because I had both these pulleys laying around. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make, but it may as well be worth it to put them to use for something. Okay, so the engine cover's off. Always replace your oil cap so nothing falls in there. The nut up here is 13 mil. These guys are 10 mil here, and then these guys are 13 mil there. So to get that clip off, just stick a screwdriver here, twist, and it will come out. Then you can take your overflow hose here out. So the overflow jug is just out of the way. I just prop it there. That'll expose this guy here, which is your supercharger belt tensioner, and this one here, which is your accessory belt tensioner. So before going any further, we'll just disconnect the battery here. This is a 5/16, and you just need to disconnect the negative terminal. That way we don't run any risk of shorting out anything when we disconnect the power lines off the alternator. Just make sure that doesn't touch back on that terminal there. So next we'll take a breaker bar with a 15 mil on it, and just get it onto this nut here, and take tension off that supercharger belt. And now we can remove that belt just so it's out of our way. You probably don't need to remove the supercharger belt. You could do the job without, but just so for the sake of being out of my way, I'm going to. Okay, so now I've got the breaker bar with the 15 mil on the accessory belt tensioner. The supercharger one pulls towards the front of the car. The accessory goes to the back. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're setting your breaker bar in there. And now I can take off the accessory belt. Okay, so next I'm going to undo this bolt here, holding this brace, which is a 15 mil. There'll be another one under it once I get that off. That's a 15 mil as well. I'm going to unclip the alternator plug, get that out of the way. In this case, this is a 13 mil for the power cable going on there. You're also going to have to come under the evap canister here. There is, I believe it's a 13 mil under here that holds this brace into the supercharger, so you will have to loosen that so you can lift this end up to get it off. On the naturally aspirated engines, I don't know if they have that. I think there is some type of bracing. Then you're going to have to come here, undo this guy, and there should be one more underneath here. It's right by the tensioner, actually. You may have to actually put tension on that tensioner in order to get to that bolt as it comes out. Okay, so I loosened off this guy under here, under your evap solenoid thing there. This should just pop off like so, and then that exposes this one and this one, which are 15 mils. So you got 1, 2, 3, and then 4 under here to get out, and then your alternator is off. So I removed the 3 bolts. You actually don't have to get that one off down below. So the alternator is out now. So that was the one I was talking about there. You do not have to do that. That's for the heater core. So the alternator is off. Now we can install the new one. So next I'm going to remove that water pump pulley that's on there. So it's the one right below the supercharger. There's 4 nuts on it, and they are 5/16, And I'm gonna have to use this guy here to hopefully hold that in place so I can loosen the bolts off. They're not nuts, they're bolts. And yeah, it's pretty tricky with that supercharger in there. I've only done this with the supercharger off the car before, so we'll see what we can do. Kind of how I got this wrench down in there. And it worked pretty well. I got the first one out. So you do have to rotate the pulley to get the best access. And the best access is right up in the front corner there, kind of by the fuse box. So you have a lot of room under the fuse box to get those out. It's a little tricky, but you can get at it. Okay, so the pulley came out. It was easy to just take it out the back way like this. And there it is. So there is the new pulley, the Underdrive pulley. So you can see the size different there. It is quite a bit larger. Not a whole lot, but enough to make a difference, hopefully. So this one I'm going to just put back in the same way. Start all the screws, and then again use that wrench there to hold it while I tighten them down. Okay, so that new pulley's on down there. You basically just want to remember when you're taking it off, you want to keep the pulley from spinning backwards towards the rear of the car, and when you're putting it on, you want to keep the pulley from spinning forwards. So that's really all you need to know in order to do that. It's pretty simple otherwise. So that's on. I tighten those down in like a star pattern, just like you would a set of lug nuts, and then go back around and tighten each one just to make sure I got them all. And so now we can put on our new alternator. Okay, so just one thing to show you about these alternators. This is the factory stock one. This one's a rebuilt, or even just an aftermarket one. It doesn't really matter. But just one thing to keep in mind is the location of the terminal and the plug. So this terminal is here. Spin these around. So you can see that they are in a different location there. And then the plug on this one is down below. And this one's up top. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's really not going to affect anything on this car, but you know, if you have a modified car, like I had one with a intercooler on it and a Gen V supercharger, and that caused a problem having this so close to the supercharger where it was basically touching it. So just something to keep in mind when you do get your new parts. Make sure they do match up. Okay, so this is the stock pulley on here. This one is the Underdrive pulley. These are 18 mil, so you can just take an impact gun and those will pop right off. And you can just install this guy here and you're all set. On this one, what I did was just plugged in my alternator connector before I set it down there. It's not bolted down, it's just in place, just so I can get at that. Then I can connect my terminal up afterwards. First bolt I'm going to do is this guy, and then the back two. Okay, so those are back on. You can put this guy back on here. You're going to connect up your terminal guy there, the power cable. And then once you got that one and your nut back on here, you can then tighten down this guy back under here and you're pretty much set. Okay, so once you got that all back together, you just want to make sure the boot on the power cable there is covering the terminal, just so you don't run into any shorting issues. And you can go ahead and reinstall your accessory belt. Okay, so these are the two belts. The Micro V is the stock size, and then the one above it there with the GM part number on it, that is the one that you're going to need to run the alternator and water pump pulleys, the Underdrive pulleys. So the best way I found to get these belts on quickly is get it around the crank pulley and the AC pulley, which is the bottom one on the right there, and then bring them up between the water pump pulley and the tensioner, and then you can move on to the next step. Next, once you have that done, you can move up over here, have both coming up like this, and then the top part there is gonna lie on the alternator like so. The bottom will go around the tensioner down to the power steering pulley there. And now is a good time to put on your breaker bar onto that tensioner pulley, so you can slide the belt up over the alternator pulley. The alternator pulley is the one I do last. That seems to be the easiest way that I found to do it. Okay, so that belt's back on. I always check with my hands down on the crank pulley, the power steering pulley, and the AC pulley down there, just to make sure that it is seated correctly. And then visually you can check the other pulleys because they're all within sight. And once you're done there, you can just go ahead and put the supercharger belt back on. Okay, so that one's back on. The easiest way there is do it around the crank pulley first, then the bottom idler pulley there below the tensioner, then the other idler pulley there, and then just get it in place to where it would be around the supercharger pulley. Use your breaker bar to release the tension, and then it'll slide up over the pulley here. Before starting the car, just reconnect the negative terminal on the battery. Just put this guy back into place, and then we'll start up the car and make sure everything is okay. A couple things to keep in mind: make sure you do connect that overflow hose properly, otherwise the supercharger belt could splice it. And then also the bottom of the coolant jug, there's a little foot that it goes into, so it's not just aligning the top guys, there is that bottom foot that you have to line up, otherwise it could flop around and get in contact with the accessory belt. So now we're good. We'll start the car and make sure everything's all right. So the car's running, everything's smooth with the belts. No wobble in any of the pulleys. So you can take shut the car off, put the engine cover back on, and just put your coolant overflow nuts back on, the strut power brace, and that's it.